Anna was a young girl who loved exploring. One day, she heard about an ancient castle at the edge of her town. It was old, abandoned, and full of secrets. People said it was dangerous, but Anna's curiosity was too strong. She decided to visit the castle alone. The castle was surrounded by tall trees. The walls were broken, and ivy grew everywhere. Anna pushed open the heavy wooden door, which made a loud creaking sound. Inside, it was dark and cold. Dust covered the floor, and spiderwebs hung from the ceiling. Anna took a deep breath and stepped inside. The first room was large, with a high ceiling. There were broken chairs and tables covered with dust. Sunlight came through the cracked windows, lighting up the room just enough for Anna to see. She noticed a staircase leading up and another one going down. She decided to go upstairs first. The wooden stairs creaked under her feet, but she kept walking. At the top, she found a long hallway with many doors. Each door was different. Some were made of wood, others of metal. Anna opened one of the doors and found a small library. The room smelled old, like books that had not been touched for years. Shelves full of thick, dusty books lined the walls. In the middle of the room was a wooden desk with an open book. Anna walked closer to look at it. The book was full of strange drawings and symbols. Anna didn't understand what they meant, but they looked mysterious. As she turned the pages, she noticed a map drawn inside the book. The map showed the layout of the castle, with a big X marking a spot in the basement. Her heart raced. What could the X mean? Treasure? A secret? She knew she had to find out. Anna carefully tore the map out of the book and put it in her pocket. She left the library and returned to the hallway. At the end of the hall, she found a window that looked out over the forest. The view was beautiful, but also eerie. The trees swayed in the wind, and the castle felt even quieter. Anna decided it was time to go to the basement. She went back downstairs, holding the map tightly in her hand. The staircase to the basement was dark, and the air felt colder as she went down. At the bottom of the stairs, she found a large wooden door. It was locked, but next to it was a rusty key hanging on a nail. Anna took the key, hoping it would fit. She turned the key in the lock, and the door slowly opened. The basement was darker than she expected. She used her phone's flashlight to see. The walls were made of stone, and the floor was uneven. There were barrels and old crates everywhere. Anna looked at the map again. It showed a small room at the end of the basement. She followed the path carefully, stepping over broken wood and rocks. When she reached the room, she saw another door. This one was metal, and it had strange symbols carved into it, just like the ones in the book. Anna felt a mix of fear and excitement. What was behind the door? She reached out to touch the symbols, and they felt cold. The door had no handle, but it started to open slowly as soon as she touched it. Inside, the room was glowing with a faint blue light. Anna stepped in, not knowing what she would find. The adventure had just begun. As Anna stepped into the glowing room, she felt a chill run down her spine. The blue light came from a strange crystal floating in the middle of the room. It shimmered and seemed alive, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The room was small, with stone walls covered in carvings of the same symbols she had seen on the door and in the book. Anna moved closer to the crystal. It hovered just above a stone pedestal, glowing brighter as she approached. She reached out her hand to touch it, but the moment her fingers brushed its surface, she felt a wave of warmth rush through her body. The crystal flickered, and suddenly, the carvings on the walls lit up in the same blue light. The room began to hum softly, like a faraway song. Anna was mesmerized. The crystal felt smooth and warm in her hand, almost as if it were alive. She turned it over, noticing a small engraving on its surface, a symbol that matched the X on the map. "What is this?" Anna whispered to herself. She looked around the room and noticed something else. A small chest hidden in the corner, half buried under dust and rubble. It was old and wooden, with metal edges that were rusty from time. Anna knelt down and brushed away the dust. The chest had a lock, but it was old and weak. She pulled on it gently, and it broke off easily. Inside the chest, she found a rolled-up scroll tied with a red ribbon. She opened it carefully, revealing more symbols and drawings. The drawings showed tunnels beneath the castle, leading to a hidden chamber marked by another X. There was also an image of the crystal she was holding, along with what looked like a warning written in old handwriting. Although Anna couldn't understand the language, she could feel the seriousness of the message. "What are you trying to tell me?" she thought, staring at the scroll. As she stood up, she felt the ground beneath her shake slightly. It was as if the castle itself was alive and reacting to her discovery. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the faint humming sound grew louder. Anna quickly put the scroll in her bag and turned to leave the glowing room. But as she stepped out, she noticed something strange. A faint shadow moved along the far wall of the basement. Her heart skipped a beat. "Hello!" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty space. There was no reply, but the shadow didn't disappear. It seemed to shift and move, like it was watching her. Anna felt her pulse quicken. She gripped the crystal tightly in her hand, unsure if it would protect her or bring her more danger. She decided to follow the map's instructions to the tunnels. Moving quickly, she retraced her steps through the basement, the blue light from the crystal guiding her way. The shadow seemed to follow her, always at the edge of her vision, but never close enough to see clearly. The map led her to a narrow opening in the wall. It looked like an ordinary stone wall at first, but as Anna held the crystal closer, the stones shimmered faintly, revealing an arched doorway. She pushed on the stones, and they slid open with a low rumble. Behind the wall was a dark tunnel. The air was damp and cold, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly. Anna hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity pushed her forward. She stepped into the tunnel, holding the glowing crystal in one hand and the map in the other. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Anna walked for what felt like hours, her footsteps echoing around her. The walls were rough and uneven, and she had to duck to avoid hitting her head on the low ceiling. But finally, she reached a large circular room deep underground. In the center of the room was another pedestal, similar to the one in the glowing chamber. On it was a second crystal, this one red and dark, as if it were asleep. Surrounding the pedestal were tall statues of figures wearing cloaks, their faces hidden. They seemed to watch Anna as she entered the room. The shadow she had seen earlier now appeared clearly. It was no longer just a faint blur, it had form. It looked like a tall, hooded figure, its shape dark and shifting like smoke. It stood silently at the edge of the room, its presence heavy and unsettling. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to do, but she felt an unexplainable connection to the red crystal. It was as if it was calling to her, just like the blue one had. She stepped closer, her heart pounding, as the shadow moved slightly closer. Was it trying to stop her, or was it waiting for her to act? Anna wasn't sure, but she knew there was no turning back now. Anna stood frozen in the circular room, clutching the blue crystal tightly. The hooded shadow at the edge of the room seemed to watch her every move. Its presence was overwhelming, and the air grew colder with every passing second. The red crystal on the pedestal in the center seemed to pulse faintly, as if it were alive but asleep. Anna felt its pull. Her mind raced with questions. Was the shadow guarding it? Was it dangerous? With trembling hands, Anna stepped closer to the pedestal. The shadow didn't move, but seemed to grow darker, its edges swirling like smoke. The statues around the room loomed silently, their hidden faces adding to the eerie atmosphere. The moment Anna touched the red crystal, the room seemed to come alive. The walls vibrated with a low hum, and both crystals, the blue in her hand and the red on the pedestal, began to glow brightly. A sharp wind whipped through the room, though there was no source for it. Then, a voice echoed in her mind. It was deep, ancient, and filled with both power and sorrow. "You have awakened what was forgotten." Anna gasped and stumbled backward, the red crystal now glowing fiercely in her other hand. "Who are you?" she whispered aloud. The shadow moved closer, but it didn't attack. Instead, it spoke. Not with words, but with emotions and images that filled her mind. Anna saw flashes of the castle in its prime. People roamed its grand halls, joyful and alive. But then came darkness, a betrayal, a war, and finally, a curse. The crystals were part of the curse, fragments of the castle's heart, split into two to lock away its secrets and its pain. The shadow was no enemy. It was the castle's guardian, bound to protect the crystals and keep their power from falling into the wrong hands. "You were waiting for someone to find them," Anna said softly, understanding now. "But why me?" The shadow didn't answer directly, but another wave of images filled her mind. She saw a woman who looked just like her, standing in the same room centuries ago. That woman was one of the castle's last inhabitants, someone who had tried to save it but failed. Anna realized this was no coincidence. She was connected to this place, perhaps through blood or fate itself. The hum in the room grew louder, and the crystal's glow became blinding. Anna felt a sudden surge of energy, as if the crystals were merging their power. She clutched them tightly, feeling both fear and determination. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice shaking. The shadow raised a dark hand, pointing to the carvings on the walls. Anna turned to look and saw that the symbols were now glowing, forming a pattern. She followed the symbols with her eyes until they led to a small alcove in the wall. Inside the alcove was a third pedestal, empty except for an engraving of the two crystals together. Anna understood. She walked to the alcove, her steps steady despite the growing energy in the room. She placed both the blue and red crystals into the pedestal. The moment they touched, the room erupted with light so bright Anna had to shield her eyes. The ground shook violently, and a loud resonating sound filled the air. Anna thought the room would collapse, but then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went still. When Anna opened her eyes, the crystals were gone. In their place was a single glowing orb of light, hovering above the pedestal. The shadow had also vanished, leaving the room feeling oddly peaceful. The orb floated toward Anna, stopping just before her. It pulsed gently, as if thanking her. Then it dissolved into a soft golden mist that wrapped around her, warm and comforting. Anna felt a strange sense of closure, as if a weight she hadn't known she carried had been lifted. She turned to leave the circular room, but as she did, she noticed something had changed. The statues now had visible faces, kind and serene, watching her with gratitude. When Anna returned to the castle's main hall, it was no longer dark and crumbling. The walls were whole, the air was warm, and sunlight streamed through the windows. The curse had been lifted. As she stepped outside, she turned to look back at the castle. It stood tall and proud, its grandeur restored. Anna smiled, feeling a deep connection to the place that she couldn't explain, but no longer questioned. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. The castle's secrets were no longer a burden. They were a part of her now, and she would carry their story forward.